there, Kato. I guess we should do like what Gary does, right? Like, should we Gary's not
Oh,
here, so like,
you mean when Gary puts on the mask and then he dramatically rips it off?
yeah. Hold on, viewership. Here we go. We gotta start this party off right. It's time to rip off the mask and pass the grass. You are in the rotation with Suncoast Normal. I'm Carlos Jose Angel Hermida Gonzalez Lorenzo Monson Rodriguez, and I am the Deputy Director of Suncoast Normal. And joining me as always, we are the classic duo of the rotation. This is Chris Cano, here, our Executive Director, and Caesar just called us fat.
Oh, yes, indeed. Been fat for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, Caesar, we embrace our fatness. Holy fat. That's what we are. Thanks for trying to embarrass us. I love you anyways.
The funny thing, most marijuana users actually tend to be on the skinnier end of the spectrum. So I don't know what I'm smoking wrong.
Yeah, I think it has to do with munchie food. I think like some people are like they get the munchies and they eat carrots. I get the munchies and I eat honey buns.
Yeah, or hamburgers, right?
Yo, AOC legalized cannabis. That didn't happen.
What?
No,
When?
we got a comment here. We got some weird comments today. Is it true AOC legalized cannabis?
No, one member of Congress could never do that, but
Yeah.
she does support the legalization of it. So
Yes. So yeah, Kano, it's Super Bowl time. Granted, we're fat guys. We don't really play that much sports. I don't really watch that much sports. You I believe watch sports. You're into sports, right?
I played football when I was younger, so I enjoy watching it. But as an adult, I realized I don't get paid to go out and practice, and I actually enjoy not being in the hot sun at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Crashing into other 300-pound men at full speed.
No,
So
I'm not into that. I was on the wrestling team in high school, and yeah, dude. First off, this was before I smoked weed, so I just had anxiety that I didn't know how to get rid of, and I sucked at it. I was in the mat the entire time. My first official match as a wrestler was against my own team because we went to a tournament, right? And another school didn't have people in my weight class, so my coach was like, "Yo, you can take Carlos."
cold blooded.
So yeah, football doesn't really look kindly on marijuana. There's a lot of sports look at marijuana, I think, as like a performance enhancing drug. I'm not entirely sure about that.
To quote an old Robin Williams joke, marijuana's only performance enhancing drug is if you're skiing down a slope and there's a big freaking Hershey bar at the end of the slope.
Yes. Robin Williams was a fat guy like us, huh?
Definitely was a cannabis user, so it helped. It helped him from his withdrawals from the cocaine and the speed.
Yeah. So we've worked with a few football players like Boo Williams, Ricky Williams, Williams,
Marvin Washington,
yeah. Marvin Washington, and there's a long tradition of sports not really looking kindly on marijuana, but now that legalization is happening, and because these guys get hit in the head all the time, they're starting to look at it as more of like a recovery thing, more about protecting than enhancing. And yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's crazy that what we've seen in the past from the National Football League is, you've seen it in the penalties for players like Ricky Williams, is that they come down on these players so hard for cannabis use. But then you see other guys like Ray Rice and some others who can literally beat their girlfriends into a coma, and they're back on the field in a matter of just a couple games.
Yeah.
And so that in itself shows a major hypocrisy when it comes to enforcing these character-based rules and regulations, because for some reason utilizing cannabis isn't just about performance enhancement, but in some ways it tries to bring into question someone's character, because that's all these arbitrary testing things do. And in the NCAA, it is much worse. Young athletes who, if you play little league for several years and you play 4 years of high school, you crank out a couple years at the collegiate level, you're going to have pain. Your body's, by the time you're 20, you're going to have, a 40-year-old's knees in some cases, depending if you're a running back, lineman, how much wear and tear you put on the body. And for a lot of these guys, they utilize cannabis at, not just for pain, but also as an anti-anxiety. I mean, the amount of pressure that is on you when you have 100,000 of your fellow students and alumni all cheering, all expecting, you to play at a top performance level. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And a lot of these guys see their entire college careers, their entire possible future professional careers go down the tubes for a positive cannabis test. And that's just not right.
No, it's not right. And I know that UFC seems to, like, mixed martial arts seems to be embracing everything a little bit more easy. I know that at least when there's like some sort of mixed martial arts event, I typically always get a phone call here at the shop asking me to advertise during the event. We got people like Nate Diaz, I believe his name is Nick Diaz.
Yeah,
we got brothers. We're smoking CBD joints during practice and shit. It's interesting to think about it. How I look at marijuana, I really look at it as like a synthesis with the human body. This plant, hands down, there's no other plant that when you consume it, it just synergizes with the human body perfectly, right? So I don't really look at marijuana as an enhancement. I just look at it as, I don't know, I want to say compliment, but I think that might be the wrong word.
I believe the proper word is it is a immunoregulator for the purpose of homeostasis.
There you go. Homeostasis.
So, what's interesting is, like you said, UFC leading the way. I guess part of that is you got to have your league president smoke copious amounts of weed with Joe Rogan for them to apparently see the light when it comes to cannabis. And unfortunately, that's not the case with the NFL. But maybe if Jerry Jones and Joe Rogan sat down together, he might the owners and the league might see things a little bit differently. But what's interesting is that the league's new collective bargaining agreement that they signed in the spring of 2020 will no longer suspend players who test positive for marijuana. And that's definitely a positive step for the NFL, which for a lot of people look to the National Football League as the gold standard for American sports. But we've also seen the Major League Baseball and the NBA both look at liberalizing their marijuana policies. And so I thought with the NFL was interesting because testing used to be, any time. And now testing is going to be limited to the first 2 weeks of training camp instead of from April to August. And the threshold of THC has been raised 4 times. And, they raise the amount of nanograms that needs to be in your body. So ideally, you could essentially smoke, Sunday afternoon, and it'd still be okay. But I mean, if they know there's this limited window where it's just the first 2 weeks of training camp, then essentially, guys can detox prior to training camp and such. And I think that's necessary in the sense that, it doesn't make sense to suspend guys for utilizing cannabis when a lot of them are utilizing it for therapeutic reasons. Rob Gronkowski has been very outspoken about his use of CBD and how it helps him. And I mean, oftentimes when I see people out there advocating the aspects of CBD, it's because that is politically popular and okay to advertise because of the non-psychoactive nature, because for some reason there's still a taboo among the general population and among public policymakers around utilizing something that's psychoactive in nature like THC. Up in Tallahassee, just this session, I was speaking to Eric Stevens from Florida for Care, and he was telling me that a lot of politicians in Tallahassee were listening to these Harvard based scientists who are saying that if you smoke anything over 10% THC, there's a possibility of you developing psychosis and going crazy. And I just listened to that. I'm just like, no. If you smoke anything over 10% THC, you're gonna get the munchies and get couch lock.
I mean, we did a whole show on that about how really genetics plays a bigger role in psychosis than marijuana does. And that shit just keeps on popping up, man. Everybody wants to blame marijuana for something, and that just goes into, I think, what's going on here. Like, if somebody's using marijuana and they just happen to be a better player than you, so they're just going to get attacked because they're using marijuana, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's the argument over it being a performance-enhancing drug. Is it enhancing your performance to alleviate pain relief? Like, should players be required to play in pain? Should people be required to play with high levels of anxiety? If it gives you relief, is that enhancing, or were you already at a disability where you're already handicapped to begin with, right? So I think there's definitely an argument there that it's not a performance enhancing drug, that it's a therapy that's necessary to keep the body performing at those intense levels.
Yeah, man. I don't know. What do you think the likelihood is that we're going to use marijuana to make our keep our players safe?
Federal legalization has a lot to do with what's going to happen with sports. The federal government's policies, still have to be changed. As long as cannabis is a Schedule I drug, there will always be holdouts at every level of government, at every policy-making body, whether public or private, that are going to have issues with it. And then even once it is legalized, there's still going to be a time period. There may even be arbitrary policies. I mean, we see local governments like down in Sarasota and other places across Florida that have more conservative, local officials who, for some reason, still want to ban adult use, even though adult use and recreational cannabis isn't even legal yet in Florida, and they're already, preempting it. And all we see is that when those type of laws are instituted, it just means that there's less access for the people in that area, which means people have to drive farther or people have to go to the black market. And, either way, that's not helpful. Either you're hurting people's pocketbooks or you're risking their freedom. And that in itself is bad public policy.
Yeah, man. And I got to tell you, too, as you know, I'm in Ybor City right now. Chillum's here in Ybor City. Fucking, like, the Super Bowl is happening in Tampa right now. There's so much alcohol consumption going on right now. There's so many people out here getting drunk. I see people literally probably 20 feet away from me sitting at a table right now drinking already. And there's so much. I mean, Budweiser has been a fucking sponsor of football for the longest fucking time. And they're literally using the popularity of sports to promote a poison and to downplay cannabis and something that just people need, I think. I'm a big believer in that. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, there's a strain out there for you, right? Yeah. And I can't stand how much alcohol is being glorified and marijuana is being pushed aside. And it's gonna sound like a capitalist thing, but we got 3 bars. I'm literally standing in the middle of bars right now, sitting in the middle of bars right now. And these guys are slammed. These guys are packed. Code enforcement has to come out here and tell them that they got to kick people out because of COVID, right? And they don't come in here. And granted, I do want their money. I'm not gonna lie, but I want to provide them something that's going to help them, and I want to sell them pipes. I want to sell them CBD or Delta 8 or CBG, whatever it is. But they're more concerned about getting blacked out drunk than they really are doing anything else. And it's just a shame. I really think our values as a society are fucked, and
that's definitely a good way to put it.
And it's really like it's like this sports culture is so big, like it could do so much good. It could do so much good if we just let one marijuana commercial happen during the Super Bowl,
Hey,
and
if only.
Yeah, and like what was it like? It's like the last Super Bowl. I think they were saying like, oh, we're totally gonna get a marijuana commercial on there. I don't think it happened.
No. The Super Bowl is probably the most political of events when it comes to the private business sector. It's look at all the backlash from Janet Jackson just pulling out a titty on a Sunday afternoon. Right?
For real. And like, and not to mention all the support she got for pulling out her titty on TV. And I'm for more titties on TV, don't get me wrong. But but I gotta say, what do you think would happen if Janet Jackson pulled out a joint and started smoking it during her set?
Oh, they did. The powers that be would probably lose their freaking minds. Way worse than anything. That would. Yeah, I firmly believe the backlash pulling out a joint would have been way worse than pulling out a titty. Yeah. And that's sad. That's the world we live at,
I mean, it's joints and titties are awesome though, but I mean, I'm sounding like Gary right now. I'm gonna start talking about Pornhub and stuff, and I should digress.
Well, my wife always says something interesting to me because she's not from this country and she makes observations about our culture all the time, and she says Americans love titties and puppies. And if you can incorporate those two things into your marketing, people will buy that product, hands down.
So that's what we need. We need a Super Bowl commercial with weed, titties, and puppies.
Think about it. How many times have you seen a Budweiser commercial with titties and puppies?
I mean, quite a few times. Wasn't there like a puppy bowl or something like that?
Yeah, there was twins, and then there's the puppy with the horses, right?
Yeah.
So cannabis advertising is definitely a new frontier. I mean, locally, you see a lot of advertising on social media within whatever social media policies you can get away with. I think one of the companies here locally that's been attempting to try to do pop culture marketing, and there's been some failures along the way. There's been some cringy moments. Is One Plant. Mm. I've seen some of their commercials, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I see what they're going for, but that delivery, those, maybe some of the stereotypes they might be reinforcing in some of their, more catered demographical advertising, not helpful, not productive. So,
I remember that commercial. That commercial was awful.
Well, I mean, cannabis advertising again is definitely a new frontier for a lot of folks, and there's going to be mistakes made along the way. Put it like this: we're in the Mad Men type of era of cannabis advertising right now. So
leave it to me, man. If we start a sports show and I talk about commercials more than the actual sport.
This is America, man. Commercials actually have a place in professional sports, right? People watch the Super Bowl and tune in for these once in a lifetime major production commercials. And it's so funny that is part of our zeitgeist. It's part of the meme in our culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I'm sitting here thinking about what would happen if Tom Brady smoked weed.
Oh, see, the thing about Tom Brady is a brand. Tom Brady is not just a singular entity. He literally is Tom Brady the Inc. Right? Yeah. So for Tom to make that leap would severely impact his brand in a way that maybe his agents and his other money makers the people that are invested in him might not want to see. And I think that's also, I've seen a lot of media recently about Tom in how they feel as though Tom has expressed some problematic views. Tom has been a very open MAGA supporter in the past. And for a lot of folks, they have a hard time reconciling that, with the fact that, oh, well, he's bringing the Super Bowl here to Tampa. I mean, think about it. First time the hometown team gets to play on their hometown turf in the Super Bowl. And for a lot of folks, they're willing to well, as long as he's winning, that's all I care about. And so we have to look at sports, right? Are sports players role models? Do they have civic responsibilities? Are they responsible to the political culture at the time? Because it varies from sport to sport. You got people sitting there catcalling LeBron James and telling them just shut up and dribble, and then Tom Brady can express, and hang out with Donald Trump and golf on the weekends. But then there's he doesn't catch any of the flack that other people might. So it's interesting in that folks think.
I think things are starting to change, man. Because, there was a point that, the whole Michael Jackson thing where, he went and he's accused of all these horrible things to children. And then, but people are like, but Thriller, bro. Thriller.
I would say Michael is a bit different because seems to be some doubt with those accusations against Michael. I think R. Kelly would be a better example.
Yeah, and that's kind of
what about I Believe I Can Fly? People danced to R. Kelly songs for an entire decade, got married to some of his songs, and now it's like you're shocked. He one of his songs, he was like, "Seems like you're ready." It's like, "Seems like you're ready," or "Show me some ID and we what." Why are you talking to a woman that you need to actually have to ask, hey, let me see your ID? Like, whoa, brother, you're in your 30s. Shouldn't be have to asking women to see their ID.
That whole thing he had with Aaliyah, too, was kind of weird.
Not weird, just gross, disgusting. Getting a 15-year-old girl pregnant who's, future superstar in the music industry. Passing out STDs to teenagers. It's not right.
But I digress a little bit. That's kind of what I'm talking about, though, is we're starting to hold people a little bit more accountable. Maybe football stars are kind of on a different keel. I think that's the right word, keel, but on a different level than music artists. Because you got Tom Brady hanging out with Trump, and people are still like, as long as he wins, fuck it, chuck it, football. But I think we're starting to hold a lot of people more and more accountable. I think, honestly, it comes down to Trump. We got Trump into office, and a big excuse for Trump supporters was oh, that was locker room talk, or, he says what he wants, and I kind of like that. And now look what happened. He had fucking coup d'etats and shit. And I think people now are starting to realize that we have to judge the artists along with the art. And maybe soon we'll judge the sports star along with their
politics.
Along with so I don't know. Maybe if Tom Brady was smoking some pot, he would be like, yo, maybe Trump's kind of an asshole,
Tom,
do that. Oh, Eric's walking up. Look at this guy.
Well, the thing about Tom is, to be in your 40s and operate at the level that 20-year-olds are operating at, you got to keep your body at peak efficiency.
Come on down, my friend. What's up? What's happening? We got Eric Stevens coming up. Go ahead, sit down.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, Eric. Welcome.
I'll let you prep for that. What's going on, guys?
You got your headphones so you can hear Kano.
That'll be helpful.
Just talking to the microphone.
What's going on?
How fitting to see you for the first time in 2 years. Get onto a camera and a microphone with you right away.
Yes, sir.
Guys, this is our friend Eric Stevens from Florida for Care. A gentleman that's been doing this cannabis activism stuff for a long time. Probably one of the most successful cannabis activists here in Florida because, he worked on the United for Care campaign. we're taking kind of like we're talking about sports and pot right now.
Oh, fantastic!
So-
I apologize. I wasn't following along on the way here. I was trying to
No
navigate.
no worries. I just want to set the scene here about
Yeah.
like because the three of us have an interesting story about how we met. Me and Kano were working as on some medical marijuana school here in Tampa. We happen to be in Miami, and we're doing something marijuana related in Miami. And Kano just kind of turns to me. He's like, "There's this Voto Latino thing going on down in South Beach, and I kind of want to crash the party. You want to check it out?" So me and Kano don't have tickets. It's an expensive party to get into. Where Kano's just like a master at sneaking into like private parties, and he's just
Nobody
like,
stops a 300-pound guy in a bow tie and a tuxedo.
So we're in there, we're mingling with the crowd. We meet Wilder Valderrama and Rosario Dawson, and we're having a great time. And we're talking about how like marijuana, we're involved with marijuana. We're getting, we're part of this marijuana business. And this guy is like standing next to us, and he's like, "I'm, financial director for the United for Care campaign." And I'm like, "Oh, we wouldn't be able to do this stuff if it wasn't for you." And then he looks at us and he's like, "I know." And goes back to the whole thing.
That was when we first met.
I think so. I may be paraphrasing it just a little bit.
That's all coming back to me now.
There might be like there might have been a handshake in the middle or something.
No,
like that,
no, that's so interesting. So how did that come back to the sports topic? Was that related to us meeting? Or was that setting the stage just for how
just
our background?
setting the stage for you?
No, I mean,
my friend.
I was, at that point, I was going around to as many different voting related groups to try and let them know what was happening. Let them know. I'm not sure if that was before we didn't pass with 60% or if that was after we had failed the first time.
It was before it
was the first rodeo.
Yeah, it was
all right.
When
Awesome.
the first go around was just starting to happen.
No, that's super cool.
And people that support marijuana campaigns were able to get
Listen,
into
there were
the
few and
Latinos.
far between. There's very few advocates that have been doing this long enough, like you guys, that have seen kind of the different levels of no one paying attention to this, to everyone paying attention to it, to it being made to be such an amazing thing, and then people try and put it down in so many different ways, and you just looking at that, and then watching the state continue to grow, and the patient population and more stores that are opening. Obviously there's people that aren't necessarily happy with how the overall setup has been, but if you're a patient here in the state and you've been able to find some different places and different products and have things, at least there's like some states don't even have delivery, right? Like they may not have the best program for it here, but at least you can get it.
Yeah.
And so, like, should you have to have two people in a car? Should you not be able to just have that as a standalone business? Probably, but we're just sadly aren't there at this point. And we'll see when we get there. But I think there's still a lot of work that continues to need to be done and educated.
And that kind of goes into what we were talking about with sports. We were talking a little bit about advertisements and how this football is so heavy on alcohol sponsorships. This store here is in the middle of 3 bars, and last night we were hardly making any money, but all the bars around us were packed, and like city officials were getting in there and telling them they had to kick people out because of COVID. And it just seems to me that if sports players could use cannabis, that because that's kind of like a similar thing in the same topic, but if we really embraced it and we really we had fucking cookie sponsorship deals for LeBron James or fucking Tom Brady or whatever, I think that would really help to change a lot of the stigmas,
for sure,
and really help for our culture to really embrace cannabis culture entirely.
And I think and listen, I don't know. I think you know enough about my background. I mean, I worked with, traveled around with the University of Miami football team for.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Years. Yeah, I was on the field for almost 10 years for games. It was amazing. I got to retire and get back to that. But yeah, no, I mean, you'd see a lot of players, mostly, honestly, when they were injured, that were using during rehabbing or other things, and it caught me completely off guard. As I was like, how are these physical specimens able to function at a high level and not, have their brains deteriorating from using this plant? Now, little did we know, them like running into each other is probably causing more harm than any of the use of this substance would.
Yeah,
right.
As a matter of fact, using this substance is helping them to get hurt from running into each other so much.
Yeah, the neuroprotective, properties. And so, I think that was intriguing to me. And, I also saw all the negatives that happen with alcohol, in college cities, et cetera. And it was just kind of like, how are people not allowed to use something that's safer, that doesn't give you a hangover, and that would allow you to function and go on? And I think, listen, there's been some big steps. It's mostly been retired athletes, but Joe Montana's involved with the company now. Al Harrington, even Rob Gronkowski, right? He getting involved with the CBD line, and CBD Meta or whatever it was. That I think changed a discussion, at least on hemp and CBD, and brought that more to the mainstream of, wow, maybe this isn't, exactly fully there, but maybe there is something more to this if, people are starting to see that. And I think they actually made them change I don't think they're allowed to even have endorsement deals now as a pro player for hemp and CBD. I believe there was a Players Association ruling sometime in the middle of the season. Mm-hmm. I may be inaccurate about that, but those are more of the things that we do need to continue to see. And I think that, some of their contracts have clauses where they aren't sure. And because, maybe all the regulations haven't been fully flushed out. But that's going to be a big change when people see this as something to help with recovery and helping with, just general wellness and learning just the overall properties and how it can be beneficial. And so I think that that's going to be great as it continues to become more mainstream, right? Even, TB12, he's got a hemp drink at his places too, hemp seed something. So like there's a lot of really interesting things. It's just not necessarily as out there as you might think. And so, I think that's somewhat intentionally. But I think the more that we get this mainstreamed and they start to see that there are people using this, listen, they see themselves as role models too. They don't want a lot of kids look up to them. They don't necessarily, you don't see a ton of them out on a alcohol ad or out on a, realistically, how many professional athletes are you seeing in those? And
yeah,
I think they're few and far between. I can't even think off the top of my head.
I hear you. We were talking about how it's like normally titties and puppies on those. We were literally talking about that before you got up there.
Yeah.
No, man.
Like they'll show people at a game and enjoying it or whatever, but I can't think, and maybe some retired athletes, but for the most part, I would say I think there's some like clauses in their contracts, even from their teams. And the league as a whole. And so I think that's definitely held things back. But I know the league's at least started to have some discussions from a medical perspective and have a like continuing group that's at least meeting with the Players Association stuff to discuss this. So, I think it's going to continue to move forward, especially if we get any federal law changes. They've already changed the testing thresholds, I believe, in the NFL and most other sports. So it's like, you have to have more nanograms, I think, in your blood for it to actually show up in a test, and you don't get tested as often. And I think the NBA didn't test at all during the bubble and said they're planning to probably not do that going forward. I don't know if they did it before the start of this most recent season, but
I remember reading an article about, I think it was either basketball or baseball, but like how like players were, bored in the bubble. So like smoking pot, just became this rampant thing.
It wouldn't necessarily surprise me. I don't know that the Wonderful World of Disney would be so excited about that, but listen, I think that that's coming. I think What I was really excited to see this past year, honestly, was, and I think this is all related, is everybody really paying attention to all the criminal justice reforms, right? And I think all the different communities that are impacted by that. And I think we need to seize that opportunity with the new administration, because they've made commitments to have a criminal justice task force, and they've made commitments to do things on this. And this is one of those big issues, whether it's expungements, whether it's, arrests, et cetera, that I think we need to look at. But, so many of those people either started get out the vote groups, got involved with get out the vote groups. Now, whether that went well, was directed correctly, et cetera, could be another story. But I think the fact that they're more involved and engaged and willing to take a stand. I mean, listen, if you were a professional athlete and you saw the type of things that went on with Colin Kaepernick, why would you go out on a limb for any such issue that was that? I mean, what would make you
That is a good point.
want to be that person?
You piss off the wrong guy and you're just done.
There's just like some issues that you like, existential things that you see, or that your agent says to you, well, you see what happened with this. You want to really have this be the discussion, what we talk about for the next however many months, and you saw, obviously, I mean, even with like guys like Ricky Williams, right? I mean, Ricky's great. He obviously, had to decide what different things were going to be most important to him, in addition to, worrying about concussions and everything else. And, has found himself to be a healer and really started to explore different plant medicines and everything else. But I mean, his reputation got tarnished. All these guys that come out for the draft that have a positive test and they have to get dropping what they make in money. It gets ridiculous. It needs to change.
I think that the real barometer for change will be the day that you see cannabis sponsorships in NASCAR. Like, that's when we know the sports world has actually moved along, because NASCAR's governing body still prohibits CBD sponsorships. And I know there's plenty of CBD companies out there, everything from, Green Rose to Provita to all these other ones, Marley and Charlotte's Web, who you have the money to go out there and slap a sticker on a car. And they want to. But NASCAR, that's the final holdout, I think, when it comes to the sports world. And when you see them finally come around, then you'll know that cannabis is finally in the mainstream acceptance that's necessary.
I thought I had heard that there was a car that either tried or was going to, or put an ad on and then had it like cover. I think they like told them like, no, like, I don't know if it was CBDMD or somebody. I want to say I saw a story about that they were trying, and like those are the things. And at this point, it's like, well, this is a federally legal, thing that we're talking about. So we need to figure out what the rules look like for that. Now, granted, and I think it's going to be an interesting discussion overall. And I think in some ways it may be part of the federal holdup is, there's different rules for tobacco products and advertising. There's different rules for alcohol products and advertising. And obviously, none of us want these things marketed to children or, anyone that could be in a harmful position. But I guess you need to have, some general awareness and other things and figure out how to best do that everyone can be comfortable and safe with. And I think that's something, because, the Project Sams and Drug Free Americas are the ones saying, oh, big marijuana is coming and it's going to be so much worse and yada, yada, yada. And, creating a new discussion that you're going to go crazy from this. And, we just need to look at the science.
Cannabis and psychosis.
Yeah.
It's I mean, the conversation, one thing that's true is that the conversation is definitely starting to change. And I was telling Kano about mixed martial arts and like how they've been really embraced CBD, I think. And like, dude, I mean, whenever we have a mixed martial arts event happening in Tampa, I get a shit ton of phone calls for advertisement. And I never really do it. And you've got also like, I don't know if you watch the sport or not. I don't really watch any sports, to be honest with you. But, you got people in there like Nate Diaz that are like, they're toking on CBD joints during practice, and saying like, this really helps me, So the conversation is starting to change and it's slowly getting in there. But, honestly, I think football is the main thing, dude. Like, I don't think NASCAR is going to necessarily do it. NASCAR is going to do it for, a lot of the gringos in America. But like one thing that we are a football nation. The NFL fucking Super Bowl is one of the biggest fucking television events in the world, you know?
Yeah.
Like you got people that don't watch football watching the Super Bowl. And there's shit for them still. There's the commercials and the advertisement. There's the fucking halftime game. Like they're watching like this awesome concert. They're still fucking watching that shit. So I really think, and you know, I can't catch me fucking watching NASCAR. Can't.
I'd rather sit by the highway than watch cars drive in circles.
Yeah, exactly.
For that long.
Or even golf, right?
Yeah. But you made an interesting point there, and actually, I think that's, you know, a lot of the Olympic laws changed. I think UFC actually officially changed their position that they now allow fighters to use it. And granted, I have my own personal beliefs. I don't know how anyone can talk about all the concussion issues in the NFL and then turn on a mixed martial art fight and have a straight face on that one. But at the same time, I do see that being an interesting segue into the sports and popular culture, because you say Nate Diaz, number one, right? Some of them are all being sponsored now. Mike Tyson said he smoked a joint before his last fight when he came out and fought. You've got this new
Mike
boxing
Tyson
league.
grows good weed, you know?
Yeah, and you've got this new boxing league that's being started by Snoop Dogg and all these other guys that are cannabis friendly that are all getting into this. And so it's really going to be interesting to see that segue, in my opinion, because I think the fighting boxing genre, similar to the soccer genre in America, has started to kind of take its way back off. And a lot of public figures are, you know, involved. You know, Barstool's got its own boxing league. You know, there's all these different leagues that are kind of getting started that have groups that are in and around and popular on this. And obviously everybody enjoyed when Snoop did the commentary on that last fight for Paul or whatever, right? And so I think he's going to continue to do that league. We're going to see kind of how that all evolves. I think there's a match scheduled for 420 weekend or something in relation to all that. But honestly, I mean, I've been waiting and hoping that they would do, you know, some sort of like a national push concert type, like, and I know that there are some things that go on, you know, every year in DC and whatever, but like, I don't know that they're more than just to support the groups that want to put on the event versus like groups that are actually trying to like make change on the laws. But I've seen all these public figures do concerts for, you know, AIDS and this and that, and it's like, you know, you guys all support these things. Can we like make a stand towards this at some point too?
Yeah.
And I think we're getting closer to that, especially with the Cookies and the other groups that are getting a lot of these artists involved that are starting to have this former athlete. And I think they have a Tim Hardaway, Scottie Pippen, a couple other guys that are like, these are not like, you know, little names. And so I think that is going to be when people can start to see people that they looked up to, that they see as athletic specimens, that they see this didn't, you know, deteriorate their life and make them like, you know, be living in a back alley all of a sudden, then I think that they are and can hear that. I mean, I think for any of us, right, when we hear a story of how something's helped someone and like how you see that person's life change, especially even for politicians, once they finally know someone, it completely changes the dynamic. Like, oh, they're not like a bad person. They just like use hemp or CBD or cannabis when they need it. And they you see their doctor all the time about it. Like,
what really changed my parents being like Christian conservative, like Cuban, like you know, my mom found a roach in my fucking drawer when I was like 16, and it was like, oh, Dios mío, and it's like she got scared shitless that I was going to become a drug addict. But no, and I dealt with it for years, and it wasn't until like early 30s when I introduced them to Giselle, who was a mother, had no other choice but to, you know, like she was sitting there, she was like, I remember seeing my mom's face and like it clicking when Giselle was like, I'm a mom. The doctors were giving my son veterinary medicine, right? I have no other choice. This is my last chance to save my son's life. And my mom was like, oh shit, I'm a mom too. I can relate to that. If I had to break the law to save my son's life, I'd break the law to save my son's life. So, I think, yeah, that education, really like getting out of your bubble and really knowing about it. And that kind of scares me a little bit too. And, with everything that's going on, dude, like, I mean, the social media algorithms and shit like that, like, it's hard to hear a different point of view these days,
Yeah. And listen, I think we got to give a ton of credit to, all of us that have kind of taken a stand before it was popular to do so on this issue, right? But especially to the moms.
Yeah.
Like Giselle and all the others, like, and listen, we all get it. They're fighting for their children. But, to be able to get out there publicly and speak on these things and know that there could be repercussions and be willing to be that voice because you're right. And that if you continue to tell your story to people and for them to see that they will understand this. And so, I have more than I could even say in great things about, all the moms that, pushed for this from the beginning through the end that are still continuing to push to get the things that they need, which they should not even be needing to do any of that.
All right. So here's how we're going to legalize marijuana in the U.S., guys. We're going to start a football league of moms who need to give pot to their children and smoke weed. How's that sound?
I think you got some of the components there.
Don't forget the puppies. Don't forget the puppies.
Oh yeah. They gotta be holding puppies while they're playing football.
Oh man, it's interesting to see how much progress is being made. I'm up here in the DMV, and federally right now, you see Chuck Schumer, who's the new Senate Majority Leader, saying there will be a vote on cannabis this year, as far as the MORE Act, which will deschedule it from the Controlled Substances Act. You see yesterday the Virginia Senate and Virginia House both legalized it, passed an adult use bill. So you will see that moving to the governor of Virginia's desk. In Maryland, the Senate president is sponsoring the adult use bill, and then you see a strong support in the House. I don't know if it'll get past the Republican governor's desk, but as far as Republican governors go, he's one of the more liberal in the country. He's been a very vocal anti-Trump Republican governor, and he's been supportive of getting out the vote. I mean, he even did a get out the vote thing on NBC with Michelle Obama and Kevin Hart. So all in all, the more conservative states here in the Tidewater are definitely moving along, and the federal government's moving along. The last crack at legalization really is the Bible Belt. It is the Carolinas, it's Georgia, it's Alabama, it's Louisiana, it's Texas. If that falls, the only holdouts we see left, essentially are Iowa and Kansas.
Yep. And most of those states that you mentioned too, they haven't had a ballot initiative process where you can collect signatures and put something on. So it's not like, even though they are more conservative and maybe wouldn't have gotten there, some of them would have. They just haven't been given the opportunity to vote on it, right? And I think if any of them were, they would have it. And now the legislators are actually moving forward and taking this initiative in some states. Now, some of them may be taking the initiative and then doing it wrong. Some of them may be, taking the initiative and trying to get it right, but at least they're moving in the right direction, right? So, but yeah, no, we gotta keep pushing. I think federally and at the state level because this is not going to go away. You're going to need to continue to educate on this. Listen, we need to continue to do more research too, right? I mean, it's been stifled for years and years. We need that to continue to get opened up. The more we can learn about this, dosing, et cetera, the better.
Yeah.
So, Eric, what do you think the likelihood of Florida's legislator passing it this year?
Passing adult use?
Yeah.
Aaron, look at you like
we
you beautiful idiot.
We got bills in the House and the Senate, bipartisan support. You know, I mean, Kano likes to say like, yeah, there's bipartisan support, but you got Carlos that's extreme left and Brandis who's like extreme right. So like, there's nothing much in the middle. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at your face and the way you responded to that, as you agree with Kano.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you've seen what I've seen up in Tallahassee, I think you'd understand. I mean, listen, we got an implementing bill passed in 2017 that still hasn't been fully implemented. And since then, the only thing that we did was sue the state for whole flower smokable cannabis. And the week after our bill passed for that, they started trying to put a 10% cap on flower.
Yeah.
And so in the past 2 sessions, that's the only bill that's moved on cannabis is to cap THC flower content. And there's just no real good education going on that. And so if our legislators are being told that over 10% is recreational and you're going to go crazy and no one's telling them otherwise, you know, it's hard when we can't even get, you know, added conditions put on or reciprocity or employment protections or like when we can't get some basic like
homegrown
patient physician rights stuff on the medical thing.
No,
listen, and I actually wish they'd middle ground that and the bill would be to put it on the ballot, right? Like, because I don't think they're going to pass it up there. But if you at least put it to them, well, don't you think people should get to vote on this?
Yeah.
I think it might make it a little bit harder for them to vote and say, oh, well, I guess I would be okay. I put 10 things on the ballot last year. I guess I could put this one on. I think you'd pigeonhole them a little bit harder because they wouldn't have to be the legalizers. They're just letting the people decide.
It's got to be,
but I don't think they're going to do that either.
It's got to be extremely difficult for you working so hard to pass the United for Care Amendment and to see how it's been implemented. And, you know, something that's so clearly, you know, something that allows for growing at home and, you know, allows for our freedoms and whatnot. And just to be beaten and bruised and just completely ripped apart, that's got to suck.
Yeah, I mean, we spent so much time and money and everything else educating on the medical properties and how this is helpful. And then it's just continually going back and basically having to try and have the same conversation. And instead of us making progress and getting things better, it's like barely being able to keep what's there or get some good progress with that. And I think that's what's been a little bit lacking, but I see it getting better. Like I think people are getting a little bit more involved. They're understanding like what the issues are, and I think we're going to be more prepared as this moves forward. But yeah, it can be frustrating, especially you know when you hear from the person who loses their job or isn't getting a job or is dealing with one issue here, their condition isn't qualified. They're having an issue with their doctor. There's a variety of different things that could have been so much better. And instead of us continuing to improve that, it's just been like barely trying to keep what's there. Right. Yeah. And that's how, so like when people want like to go to the next level, I'm like, man, we got to at least like get this figured out and have them all be comfortable and understand the like medical parts of this. If you guys want to have that next discussion, because, even if you put something on the ballot and passed it, would the governor veto it? He's been vocally against this. So him and a bunch of others would probably be against it if it was on the ballot, be campaigning against it.
Is his party going to buck him? Would they override his veto? Probably not.
Yeah, it's so and so you don't really know necessarily all the dynamics of that, and so I think it's a lot of those things. But as much as we can try and push for some like general patient physician stuff, and even like some reciprocity things for a good medical system here would be pretty good because you have a ton of people that are coming and visiting that have their cards in other places. And I think that there's a huge value to having a good medical system. I mean, you don't have all these, extortionist taxing structures and everything else that occurs. And so, we need to make sure that we have a well implemented medical system. And I think that's what we've tried to continue to do with Florida for Care is make sure, like, I know there's been a ton of people that are focused on some hemp policy stuff and some adult use policy stuff. And like, personally, super supportive of almost everything that I hear proposed out there, right? But I think at this point, it's like, all right, we just got to like still get this part right and do it well and make people understand this more. And then I think those next discussions and steps, and whether that's the criminal justice reforms, whether that's how tax and regulate structures would look like, whatever that may be, I think that's
Well, Kano, what was that bill you were talking about that, like, you know, there's like an extra tax on top, or like a $50 payment?
Oh,
or
yeah.
something?
one of the adult use bills in the state, right? Has
Yeah, one of the adult
tax.
use bills has a $50 flat excise tax, and I'm like, okay, so now we're gonna have $80 eighths like that.
Well, and then what if the feds change something, and then are they going to have something
it
there?
would
You're going to have a
be-
federal tax and a state.
Yeah.
So
And it would still be like, because right now medical marijuana, it's expensive in Florida, but it's still not taxed. So I mean, and I'm right? Like that's I'm like second guessing myself.
yeah,
No, but it's still not taxed, even though it's fucking expensive. You know, it's still not taxed. So we make it so that marijuana is not necessarily considered medicine anymore. And all of a sudden, like, we got state tax coming in and excise tax, and the price probably isn't going to go down unless they let more people into the business. So
Yeah.
I mean, what the fuck?
yeah. No, and
That's-
listen, I've seen what I've seen too is I'm seeing THC caps getting filed in multiple other states, and people having to defend against those. And I'm seeing some interesting things with the adult use structures where over 10% products are being taxed at a higher level, like in Illinois. And I think that's a little bit different discussion. And I guess
And
maybe you could have
they really are fucking sneaky with that 10% tax too, like, or the 10% cap. Like, they are sneaky fuckers. Like, they will fucking whittle that into like any little bill that's coming out. And
they tried to add it on a health policy bill at the last committee stop last year as an amendment with no discussion. And they had to, it failed, but because it was going to kill the bill. And it's just, there's a couple people that are determined to try and screw this up. And that seems to be the new way of doing it. And people just need to be aware. All that does is make people have to buy more, smoke more, use all the things they say they don't want you doing. It doesn't even solve those.
Yeah.
So like if you basically understand math, if you have 30% and you have 10%, you're going to need 3 of those, right? Like it's like such a simple math and science discussion that like it boggles my mind that anyone can sit there with a straight face and just listen to it.
Eric, math and science do not come into play when we're talking about the rhetoric that the Anti-Drug Alliance
I know.
Drug Free America have. We sat up there in 2016 at the Lakeland City Council for a decriminalization ordinance, and it ended up dying on a 3-3 vote, tabled for later. But they sat up there and said, under this policy, we were asking them to decriminalize misdemeanor possession, which is 20 grams or less. And the lady holds up a bag and says, oh, look, you can get 60 to 100 joints out of these 20 grams that they're suggesting. And I'm like, since when can you get 60 to 100 J's out of 20 grams?
No, you're right. I mean, I started with decriminalization. We decriminalized Miami Beach and Miami. Yeah. And they like, these people come out of nowhere and
it's like you can get 100 pots out of 20 grams of marijuana.
My response to the lady was, Mr. Mayor, I don't know where she's rolling her joints from, but I can tell you there's no way that I'm getting 100 out of 20 grams. And the whole room erupted in laughter because it is so absurd. Everybody was laughing but Grady Judd. And then the mayor chided me for, Mr. Kano, you know what you're doing with your grandstanding. And I'm like, no, she's grandstanding with this ridiculous, unscientific data that apparently you all are willing to accept is just fact.
Yeah, no, and that's sometimes what it takes. Like these people just aren't used to being told like how it is. They're just being used to yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and whatever, and they need to just take a step back and listen that there may be more than one point of view that they need to look at, and slowly but surely they're coming around. I think it's more the personal stories than the math and science sometimes, but whatever it takes for whoever, we just need to keep at it.
That's a great point, Eric. The personal stories. I mean, we touched on it earlier with the Cannon Moms. It is personal stories that have influenced a lot of the United States senators to get on board with the MORE Act, like Cory Booker, like Kristen Gillibrand, Chuck Schumer, of actually seeing sick patients come up there and tell them, my only form of relief. So if you're a sick patient, if you have a story to tell, we want to help you and give you a platform to tell that story. So you can contact us at suncoastnormal.org. You can hit us up on our social media. We want to hear your stories because it is patient stories that make all the difference in pushing public officials and policymakers in the right direction.
For sure. And I'd say, I don't know if you guys have seen, there was a documentary probably 6 or 7 months ago that came out on BET, and it was really, really good. It delved into kind of the history, music, sports, culture, all the background, and some of those personal stories. And also want to give a shout out to Last Prisoner Project. Was with Richard DeLisi yesterday. They've been getting so many people out of jail recently. And, Core Vancouver, some others that, have just been in for over 30 years. And these people, got to go home and see their families for the holidays this year. And so, it's just really great to see some of the work that's continuing to go on. And that's where I think that combination of the criminal reforms and the cannabis reforms and the expungements and jobs and like, how do we tie that all in? And I think that that's where we're moving towards now. But, in Florida, guys, right? Like we're like our own country here, right? Yeah. Like Miami's its own like state, Orlando's its own state, Tampa's its own state, Tallahassee's own, Jacksonville. So like we need to have good groups in those areas being ready to discuss these things because sometimes they pop out of nowhere. Legislatively in Tallahassee, you usually get like a week's warning or less that something's going to have a hearing. And so if you're a doctor, what are you going to do? Clear your schedule for the next week, cancel patients and fly up there?
And
like
Tallahassee is like the most inconvenient place to have a capital.
Oh,
like I am so tired of having to drive up there on a whim and like fucking take like fucking 5 hours to drive up there. And I'm only in the middle of the state. Like I can't imagine like you live in South Florida, man, and like fucking having to drive like 8-10 hours just to get to Tallahassee. Because they snuck a 10% fucking thing in some obscure bill. Like
they should have never rebuilt Tallahassee after the Seminoles burned it down the first time.
Yeah, well, there was a tornado when I was up there the other day, and I was like, maybe just take the whole thing out. We'll have to do it all in Orlando. But no, it just freaked me out. Actually, I haven't really been around a tornado warning before like that.
Oh, yeah.
Hurricanes and blizzards, but not the tornado. So.
We got a few tornadoes happening in Tampa.
Oh, hopefully not the rest of today. But yeah, I'm out here in town. I had to come out and support my guy Tom Brady. I'm a Massachusetts guy, so I had to get out here and support everything going on here in Tampa.
You look a little bit like Tom. Eric, y'all got a
we got some relatives.
I didn't get the height or the football skills.
You're definitely typically when I see you, you're dressed in like some sort of like nice suit and like,
today I'm
in my Tom Brady goat jersey. So,
had to be repping. So there you go,
guys. Okay, guys, we got a few minutes left in the show. Eric, you kind of came in there in the middle, and we had an introduction that was pretty informal. So I wanted to give you a chance, let people know what you do. And
So, Eric Stevens, I worked originally when I met these guys. We had 2 ballot initiatives, both for the same thing, which was medical marijuana in the state of Florida. Both became Amendment 2. We collected over 1 million signatures twice to get on the ballot. Then we had to get out the vote, and we formed an organization, Florida for Care, to really be like a continually educational, implementing social advocacy organization. Because, I saw in Massachusetts how they slowed down the process, how things got delayed, how things would just pop up here, there, and everywhere. And just knew that we were going to need to be prepared as this all moved forward, and that it wasn't going to go as seamlessly as it needed to be. And I've worked on some different business development for a couple different groups, ancillary space, but for the most part, I've just tried to stay pushing for patient physician advocacy and trying to make Florida's program as good as we can. And then, I think hopefully we can continue to make a push even further than Florida now at the federal level and see kind of where we can go from that. But I was on Nikki Fried's medical marijuana advisory board for the past year or so. I think they've been making some decent discussions and progress, more so in that recently. But the state's just so divided.
I heard she might run for governor.
I've heard a lot of different things out there. I can't confirm nor deny. But yeah, no, listen, I think there's a lot of really great, exciting things. But, even, just someone that takes this issue and runs on it with a positive platform for one of the first times, we've done a lot in Florida to give people the confidence to understand and push on this, right? That's not something that would have been possible years ago. And so I think that's all of us and all of the stories that we've been telling and having discussions on. And it's not going to change. I think we're going to still need to continue to be involved.
It's a good point, man, because like when we first met, like the mentality was like our legislator's not going to do it. We got to do it ourselves. We got to pass this amendment, right? And now that the amendment's passed, it's like, okay, it's here, but it's not going to be done right unless we vote the right people in to implement it correctly. So I think getting people in there that have positive outlooks on this is really the most important next step.
No, for sure. No, you gotta stay involved. You gotta, stay involved locally. You gotta understand who's running. You gotta have a better sense of, what bills are out there, who's voted for them, how they can get passed, and just, continue to tell your story. Pick your top 3 to 5 issues, and be concise on those. You're only gonna get a couple seconds, sometimes maybe a minute, with some elected officials or people who can, be important in this, and just try and convey your story or the story of your mom or whoever, sick family friend, and why, they've had an issue and what could be helpful for that. And you'd be surprised to see how much more they're understanding now than they may have before, and how much more they are listening, even though it doesn't seem at times.
Kano, you got anything to say before we close out?
Eric hit everything on the head. I would say, the most important thing for you, the cannabis consumer, is to also be an educated member of the electorate. If you're not registered to vote, then you are not exercising your full potential when it comes to this movement of wanting to legalize it. We are long past the days of, standing out front and firing up a joint to purposely get arrested. Like that is not the way you do it these days. You do like what Eric's doing. You do what we do. You put on the suit. You go into the halls of government. You sit down with these folks. You share your story. You work to build organizations like the ones we're building in order to exert public pressure. And so, on that note, we are a membership-based organization. And so becoming a member of NORML, becoming a member of our chapter of Suncoast NORML, allows us to put pressure on these politicians here in the Bay Area, here in the I-4 corridor, where votes are so important, where the issues that are important to us become issues that are important to the entire country as a whole. And so get involved, join the movement, and become a member of Suncoast NORML today, and do your part to helping us legalize it.
And don't forget to follow us on social media. We're at Suncoast NORML. That's NORML. And we've got this podcast going on a lot of different platforms now. So if you want to listen in your car, we're on SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iTunes. And I got to update this graphic to say Google Podcast. And we're in the middle of being approved for Pandora. I don't know. They're taking a long time for that. You can watch us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. All of our social medias at suncoast.norml. And you can even watch live on our site. And what's going on here? New member link for graphics. Oh, I see what you're doing. Kato just threw me off by sending me a message. And also, we've got these cool face masks available on our website. Come into the store. All that stuff. I'm going to give Eric one when we get on a break. There you go. And we love you all. Unless anybody else has anything else to say, that's it from us.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate all y'all do. Been great checking in, listening to you guys and Gary, and always good to catch up. Wish this past year had been a little bit more in person, but hopefully 2021 and 2 will be better.
Cool.
Jump into rotation anytime.
Oh, for sure. I'm gonna have to do this more often. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.